We'll do now the 50th mamer in the Mamorim Melukotim and Beis. The mamer that starts Basi Legani Achoisi Kalo. It was said on Monday. Yom Beis Parshis Yisrael. The portion of Yisrael was on the 2 B'Shvat, the 5th of Shvat. Hey Tovshin Lamed Ches. And then later on, this was printed on a special booklet in honor of the 22nd day of Shvat, Chov B'Shvat, Tovshin Mem Tes, which was the Shabbos, Parshas Kodesh, Parshas Yisrael, the 22nd day of Shvat, which was the Stalkus Rabbonis Konis Moroschai Mushkin Nishmos Eid Zechus Yogan Aleinu. Dated Erev Shabbos Kodesh Chov B'Shvat Tovshin Mem Tes. That is when it was published. All right, so we'll learn the Maimon. Bosi Legani Achoisi Kalo. So he quotes the verse in Shira Shirim, which is the Maimer of Yud Shvat, in which the Posik says that the Eibishter says, I've come to my garden, my sister, my bride. Basically, the previous Rebbe brings down in this Maimer, Umevi Kvet Kedushas Merichom Admur. My father-in-law, the Rebbe, brings down, and this Maimer is being said on Tu B'Shvat, is the Baal HaHilula, the Yud Shvat. He is the one whose Yortzeit, Hilula, is on the 10th of Shvat. And being that this is the 15th of Shvat, is Shashlemus, the Chol Yemei HaChodesh, the wholesome, the completeness of all of the days of the month. He b'yom hatezvav is on the 15th day. Sheboy kayimo siharo ba'ashlamusa. On that day, on the 15th day of the month, the sun, the siharo, is in its wholesomeness. It's at its largest point, fullest point. The moon is at a full moon, which means that all the parts of the moon, as it was going from day to day, becoming larger from including the 10th of the month, it is being completed on the 15th of the month. So therefore, there is that connection between the Maimer of Bosi Legan Achesi Kalo, which the Friedrich Rebbe said, gave out for Yud Shvat, to the time that the Rebbe is giving the Maimer on the 15th of Shvat. So the brings down b'mamorei hayedua dibur hamaschil zeh, in the known Maimer that opens with this opening. The Isa b'medrash that we find in the medrash, the pirush bosi legani hu hamshogas v'yeridas iker shchina lemato ba'aretz. What it means, I've come to my garden. What came to the garden? It's brought down, what we draw down into the garden, into Elam Hazeh, u'hamshochas v'yeridas iker shechina lamata be'oretz. That is to draw down and to bring down the level of the main shechina below in the earth. That is what is taking place, and the meaning in the verse, Basi Legani, to bring down the main shechina down into the earth. Iker hamshochazu hoiso kishahukom hamishkan. When is the main time that this came down, that this was drawn down? That took place when the Mishkan was raised. The Mishkan was the time when the Basi Legani, when the Iker Shechina came down. Kidi Isa b'medrash shom, as the Medrash says over there, that the aim of Saishor Shechina Olaho, when is the Shechina when did the Shechina rest? Ba'aretz, Aleha. When did it come down onto the earth? Is v'yoim shehukam hamishkon, on the day that the Mishkan was erected, that it was raised on that day. So that is when the time of the Shechina came down. Like the pasuk says, "V'osu lemigdosh," make for me a sanctuary. V'oz, when you make a sanctuary, v'shachanti b'soicham, then I will rest amongst you. So we need the Mishkan. The time of the Mishkan is when the shachanti b'soicham, not before. Although the beginning took place by Matan Torah, which was before the building of the Mishkan. Bagam shegam b'matan Torah hoysam shochas v'yiridas hashchina lemato. Although that also when the Torah was given, there was the drawing down and the descent of the Shechina below into the earth. The pasuk says, "Vayered Havaya al Har Sinai," the descent of Havaya onto Mount Sinai. So there is already Hamshocha and the descent of the Shechina Lamata. So Yesh Loimar. So we can explain the chiluk is that by Matan Torah it came Mitzad Milmailo. It came from Hashem. The Hamshocha that takes place when we built the Mishkan, that comes through the Avodah of a Yid, Avodah of the Tachtonim of Lemato. So the main connection with the Shechina coming down Lemato in a Pnimius takes place when you actually built it, when the Yidden made the Mishkan, and not just when the Matan Torah, when it came down from above. Especially not just a regular avodah from Amato, but an avodah of iskafia v'ishapcha, to turn things around in Olam Hazeh, to make from Olam Hazeh, make it into a Mishkan. That avodah of the Mato brings down into a Pnimi is the highest madreges, and that's why we say that the Bosi Legani was really when the Mishkan was raised. As it says, Yeshloimar, we can say, Sha'ikero inyan daham shochas v'yiridas ashchina lamato ba'oretz, who, when is the main idea of drawing down and the descent of the divine lamata ba'oretz, hu keshaham shocha lamato hi bipnimis, is when this drawing down, when it comes down below, is in an inner, but often in such a way shehamato mizdachechum misala ali, they said, that the below refines and is elevated through the Shechina coming down. Sometimes you can have the Shechina down here, like by Matan Torah. Yes, it came down, but it didn't impact, it didn't refine, it didn't elevate the lower level. It didn't come down in a pneumonia. So it was there, but not really there in the tachtonim. When those things come down the tachtonim, that comes down through the work, through the Avedas HaMishkan. Shezehu davke kishahamshocha hi al yidei Avedas HaMato. When is the refinement and the elevation of the one below of the tachtonim is davke, when the Hamshocha is through the work of the Mata. And that's why he says, that's why he says that the main drawing down of the Shechina in the earth was when the Mishkan was raised. The Hamshocha that was when the Torah was given, that was from above. That came from Hashem. That was from the perspective of above. Shelochein hoya hagilui lifisha, because it didn't penetrate, it didn't unite with it didn't fuse with the matter. So therefore, it was only temporarily, because it was there, but it wasn't really in an inner there. The advantage when we bring down the Shechina in the Mishkan, that this Hamshocha, that we say, I dwell amongst you, is al yidei avoda v'asiya, is through work, through doing, making the Mishkan, v'osuli migdash, make the migdash. The Rebbe adds now, so the first point is that it has to be through avoda samato to really get the Hamshachas Hashchina Lamato to refine and to remain and to accomplish. You need to have Avodas Hamato, the general Avodas Hamato. The Rebbe adds now, specifically within the Avodas Hamato, the Avodah Viskafya V'Yishapcha, to turn things around. V'yesh lehoisif. So we can add the Mailas HaHamshocha B'Mishkan U'Migdosh. That the advantage of what was drawn down in the Mishkan, also in the desert, and later on the Beis Hamikdash, over, be above the Hamshocha Shohisub Matan Torah, then the Hamshocha that was Matan Torah, he loy rak mitzad zeh shahamshochi al yidei avodah b'chlal, not just because the Hamshocha comes through work and not from above. Hello, but there is a specific avodah. There is an advantage of the avodas hamishkan. But also because of this shahavodah devaosu li migdosh, that this service of making a migdosh, the mato is working on subduing and turning around. Hafichas hashtus de leumazel shtus de kedusha, to turn around the shtus of the other side of the leumazel to hashtus de kedusha, as explained over there in the mamer atzei shitim, and the idea of shtus de kedusha. The gam beham shocha shabo al yidei avodah, because even when we talk hamshocha that comes through work, if hamshocha shal yidei avodah diskafi v'ishapcha, when we talk about what comes down through the service of iskafi v'ishapcha, hinailis yoiser, it's a higher level mehamshocha shal yidei avodah binyon kedusha, than hamshocha that comes if the service is in holy matters versus weekly matters, to turn around and make them from Lumazet to Kedusha. There's an advantage, and there is a greater level of bringing the Shechina b'tachtoinim, the Iker Shechina, when you're working with Li'umazeh and his Kafi and his Habcha more even than just working, if you would be working with the Yonah Kedusha. Because the advantage of light is when it comes from darkness, specifically when we turn around darkness. When we take the Le'umazeh and we turn that around to Kedusha, there is a advantage in the light that comes from darkness. Through the fact that darkness turned to light, then it becomes an advantage in the light. The light is greater when it comes from turning around the darkness and making light. as explained at length in the Maimon. So now it comes out that during Matan Torah we didn't have the highest level, and the highest level of bringing down the Shechina b'tachtoinim came during the Mishkan. But the Rebbe says now that everything, the power that we are able to later on turn things around to be mamshich and to have turn around the choshech, Yisro Na'or Min HaChoshech, came through the power of Matan Torah, that we got that ability then, that then through Avodah we are able to be mamshich and Yisro Na'or Min HaChoshech. V'hina yadua sheb'Matan Torah, it's known that during Matan Torah niten hakoyach al klolus inyan ha'avodah, the power was given for generally for the idea of service, the avodah of the person. The hagam sheham shocha shal yidei avodah, because although we say Matan Torah is not through avodah, but the power we get through Matan Torah, although the hamshocha shal yidei avodah, even though the hamshocha that comes through work, period, any work. And certainly through the avodah, the hafichas hachoshech loir, by turning darkness to light. Yesh lo yisrein ala hamshocha shohoiso bepoel b'matan Torah, has an advantage over the hamshocha which actually took place by Matan Torah, which was hamshocha that did not come through work. And it's greater, the hamshacha that comes through work like the Mishkan. But ze gufa shal yidei avoida yuchlu lahamshich hamshachas elu. This itself, that through work we are able to draw down these hamshachas by turning darkness to light, ubekoyach hamshachas shohisa b'matan Torah. And that comes with the power of the hamshocha that took place by Matan Torah. So we can say that the zeh shebehamshocha, the Matan Torah, oyo bekoyach, that potentially we're saying what came down Matan Torah, it also had Gama Ilu the Hamshocha Shal Yidei Avodah. It also had the advantage of the Hamshocha, which comes through work, and not just regular work. And the type of work which is the advantage of light, which comes from darkness, which means by turning around the L'umazeh. Who? So how is that? Because actually Matan Torah also came about in a way through a Yisra Na'or Mitoch HaChoshech, which came about through Yisra's recognition of Ke'ato Godel Hashem, Ato Yedaiti Ke'Godel Hashem Mikol Elikim, which Yisra, who was accomplished in all the Chokmas Chitzonius, that he turned around and he recognized the Shekhinah, that's the divine, and that's when the Eibishter gave the Torah. So it turns out that the Torah itself was given through a level of Yisro Na'or Mitoch HaChoshech, and that's why that was potentially, and that's why at that point we got the Koyach to give the avodah, when we do the avodah of the Mishkan, the Maisa through the avodah and his kafia and his hapra chashoichel in the heira, Yisro Na'or Mitoch HaChoshech, that we should be mamshich the higher madrega. Ki hamshocha the Matan Torah hoiso, for the hamshocha Matan Torah was la'acharei she'amar Yisro, after Yisro said, Ato yodati ki godel havaya mikol ha'elikim. Now I know that havaya is greater from all of elikim. It is some bezoyar, like we find in the Zoyar. It says in the Zoyar, Shal Yidei Shehoide Yisrei v'Omar. By Yisrei admitting and saying, Ato Yodati Ki Godil Havaya Goymer. Now I know that Havaya is great. Istalik Yakir, it came down that high level and it was precious. Kuchabrichu became cherished. B'yikora ilo v'tato, in the preciousness of a splendor of above and below. And after this, after Yisro gave this yikora of the kuchabrich and above and below, then the Eibishter gave the Torah. So Bal Yidei Sheham Shochad the Matan Torah Hoysol Achrei Hoydos Yisroi, through the fact that Torah came down, was Nimshach. In the world, they gave the Torah. Dafke, it was after the admission of Yisroi. Nasa Yisroi Kaviyochel, that so to speak brought an advantage Behat Torah. In the Torah that was given at Matan Torah, it brought about an advantage because it came after Yisro's turnaround. Even though this is from above, but yet there is an advantage of the bedugmas Yisro similar to the advantage of light that comes through Avodah min HaChoshech. Over here, there was an advantage in Torah that comes after Yisro. Elo, Matan Torah, the difference is by Matan Torah, Kivan Shenesinas HaTorah Hoyso Mitzad Lemailo, since the giving of the Torah was from above, by those Yisroi Hoyso Rak HaKedama LeMatan Torah, and Yisro's admission was merely only a introduction to Matan Torah. So this wasn't really came to Maila, it wasn't through Avodah. And Yisro's was a prelude, a Hakdoma for Matan Torah. So Yisro and Kaviyochel, the Torah Shenasal Yidei Hedos Yisro, that advantage, so to speak, in the Torah that came about through Yisro's admitting and saying, Ata Yadaiti, Hoyarag B'koyach. So that was just potentially. And that's why by Matan Torah, it's not yet brought down the ultimate Shechina as it is through the Avodas HaMishkan. But through this, it brings down the power that was given. That through the work of turning darkness to light, there should be also the advantage in the light, also in actuality, that we should feel that when we do a mitzvah, we actually, and especially when we built a mishkan, when is take the umazeh, we have the Yisra Na'oir, Abov and Acheshach practically, and that's why the Ikar Shechina is with the building of the Mishkan. Gimel, based on this, we can explain this, that is written in many of the Drushim, in the Mamorim, שבכדי לבאר מה שקודם מתן תורה, הוא צריך להיות ידוס ישראל. So they say in the Mamorim, in order to explain why was it necessary that before Matan Torah there should be the admission of Yisrael. So it says Yuvan Zebahagdim. So it explains in the Maimorim that we can understand this, that why did Yisrael have to admit Masha Kosuv? And we just explained that this idea of Yisrael was the idea that was Yisrael Na'er Mitech HaChoshech Ato Yadaiti. So now we understand what the Maimorim introduced to explain this concept that Yisrael had to admit. They understand it by first introducing Masha Kosuv, the Posik says in Koheles that V'ro'isi ani, that Shlomo HaMelech says, I see sheyesh Yisrael lechochma min hasichlus, that there is an advantage to wisdom over foolishness, ki Yisrael ha'or min hachoshech, as the advantage of light that comes from darkness, which the Gemara move on. Is not understood. Talking about Shlomo HaMelech says, I see that there is an advantage to wisdom over foolishness, like the advantage of light over darkness. We don't need to be such a chacham l'chayre like Shlomo HaMelech. In a move on, is not understood. As he actually raises the issue in the Zohar. Why does it say I saw? Introduce doesn't just say yes. He says I see. Shlomo HaMelech, the one who is wiser than all people. But this is something that everybody knows. That there is an advantage to wisdom over foolishness. Explains that here foolishness is talking about the chokhmas chitzonius, not talking glat stam foolishness. We're talking about wisdom, but this is the external wisdom relative to the Torah. It's called sichlus. That what is the intention here in foolishness? We're not talking literally about foolishness. We're talking about the external wisdoms, the external sciences, which are considered foolishness if you measure them next to the wisdom of Torah. Yes, they're not in essence foolishness, like it would seem from the word sichlus, but relative to the Chochmas HaTorah, they're sichlus. And this, what Shlomo HaMelech says, I saw there is an advantage that when the Chochmas HaTorah comes from the Chochmas Chitzonius, there is an advantage, just like when the darkness turns to light. Just like the advantage of light is when you turn darkness to light, the same thing is when you turn Chochmas Chitzonius, the Sichlus, into Torah. The Gemoi sheyisrein ha'oid hu min ha'choshech davke. Just like the advantage of the oid is when it comes from darkness, specifically that through the darkness being turned to light, it becomes an advantage in the light. As explained at length in the mamer of the Lula, in the mamer of Legani Yushvat, the advantage that is in the light through the fact that you're turning the darkness into light. Similarly, is also in the wisdom of Chochmas HaTorah and V'sichlus, the Chochmas Chitzoni, that is a Yisrael. La Chochma min HaSichlus, Yidei Birur V'Hafichas HaChochma D'Lu'umazel L'Kedusha, through the sorting out and the turning around of the wisdom of the other side, and you're turning it to Kedusha. This brings about an advantage and an addition in the Chochma of the Kedusha. So now this explains why before Matan Torah there needed to be the admission of Yisrael, because that is the process of turning Sichlus, Chochmas Chitzonius, into Chochmas HaTorah. Yisrael haya Chocham Gadol b'Chochmas Chitzonius. He was a great, very wise in the external wisdom. Yisrael, through Yisro admitting God el Havaya Mikol Halikim, that Havaya is greater than all Halikim. Nasa Habirur Shel Chochma de Leumazeh. So that sorts out the wisdom of the other side, the wisdom of the Sichlus Chochmas Chitzonius, Shenepkol Chochma de Kedusha, that it turned around to the wisdom of Kedusha. And through that turnaround of the Chochmah Lumazet Chochmah de Kedusha, Nasa Yisrain V'Yisov Chochmah de Kedusha, there becomes an advantage and an addition to the Chochmah of Kedusha. L'maylo Yeser Mikamoshim Tzadatzma, higher than it is by itself. That without the turnaround of Yisroy of Chochmah de Lumazeh, it's a high madrega, it's Chochmah Satoida, it's Chochmah. But when we take Sichlus and we turn it around to Chochmah, there becomes an addition and the Chochmah de Kedusha. And the Rebbe explains now that's why we say Yisroy, even though he added a Vav, the Vav that we added to Yisroy, his name was Yeser before. Because even before he was Yeser in Chochmah Chitzonius. But Yisroy with a Vav, which points to the advantage of Torah, that became after Ke'ato Godel Likim. See what the Rebbe says in the brackets. Based on this, we can explain Masha Omer Azal, this that our sages of blessed memory say, the Hatam Shenikra B'Shem Yisroy. What is the name, the reason why we call him Yisroy? Who? It is because Lefisha Yiter Parsha Achaz B'Torah, he added one Parsha in the Torah, V'ata Sechazeh, the suggestion that Yisroy gave to Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's an extra Parsha in the Torah that was added by Yisroy, and that's why his name is Yisroy. The L'chaira, but beforehand it was called Yeser. So the L'chaira, Aragam, Hashem Yeser, even the name Yeser, Hu Meloshen Yisroy. Even without Yisroy, but just Yeser is also comes from the language of an advantage. Lama Nikra B'Shem Yeser, Lifnei Sheyiter Parsha B'Torah. So why would we call him Yeser before he added the Parsha B'Torah? Based on the above, we can say that we're saying that he was great in the Chochmas Chitzonius. That was the greatness of in the Umazeh itself. He was great in the Chochmas Chitzonius. That Shem Yeser Meloshen Yisro. We can say the reason he had the name Yeser Meloshen Yisro Shahoya Nikra Melukotim, that he was called earlier before. Umitzad Yisrein Umayla Saseichel, that is because of the advantage and the elevation of the intellect that Yisrein possessed. The Yisrein Umaylas Hal Seichel Alamidus, because when we talk about an advantage and a level, a higher level that Seichel has more than Midos, it's also in L'umazeh. Also, wisdom on the other side, Chochmah de L'umazeh is greater than Midos. So somebody like Yisro who was great in Chochmah can be called Yeser. He has the advantage of Chochmah. But in L'umazeh, while there is an advantage, but the fall is even greater. The Yeshes, the Gas Saruach, brings you down even further. But when we talk about Chochmah on the other side, the Yoiso Tachlis HaYeshus, since its total Yeshus of self-entity is the fact that he is that of the greatness intellectually, and therefore V'hanefila Shal Yidei HaMoichin, the fall which comes through the moichin, through the intellect, the lumazeh on the of the other side, hinefila gedola yoser minefila shaydei amidus the lumazeh. That fall is greater than the fall that comes through the emotion of the other side. So we call it yeser But the yeser actually, as we use, say, in the Lashon of Chazal, Hayisrin Shabohu, what is the advantage? Al derech she'amru kol yeser kinot l'dami. That if you have, for example, an extra limb, is as if that limb didn't exist there, loss of trephus, it would be not kosher. But yes, it's yeser. But the yeshus is great, so the nefila is great. It's kinot l'dami. So he was already yeser, but it was a yeser kinot l'dami, because he had the maila of chokhmah lumazeh. But la'achreishen is gair the yiter parsha achas b'toiro. But after he converted and he added a portion in the Torah, then is nikra b'shem Yisroi b'toises vav. Then he's not just yeser kinotol domi, but now he's Yisroi with additional vav. The vav moire al Torah. The vav points to Torah kedisa b'zoyar, as we find in the Zoyar shevav hu ois emes. That vav is the letter of truth. And therefore, he was given that letter of emes. Emes is ein emes elo Torah. Emes is Torah. So if it's the vav which is emes, so that means that we gave him the Torah, lehoiros. That is to point Yisra and Shaboi, that the advantage in Yisra is loy bechokma del umazeh. That extra vav is not in the wisdom of the other side, which was yeser before, but in the chokhmah wisdom of Torah. But now, the Rebbe is going to ask, but what is the chiddush that there is an advantage of chokhmah over sichlus once we know already that there is an advantage, the Irma comes from the choshech, so l'chayra, the same would apply to the chokhmah sichlus, to the chokhmah satorah. Why do we still need Shlomo HaMelech saying that? The tzorich lahavin, we need to understand the melashoina kosu from the language of the pasuk. Sheyesh yisrein lechokhmah min hasichlus ki yisrein ha'omer min hachoshech. That there is an advantage to chokhmah from foolishness, as is the advantage of light from choshech. Means that it's known to us that there is a Yisrael min hachoshech, and we're trying to say that there's also a same advantage of chokhmah over sichlus. Mashma, it is understood that this, the fact that there is an advantage to light when it comes from darkness, which means that when you turn darkness to light, through the darkness being turned to light, that seems that is known, because you're saying ki Yisrael. The pasuk comes up with a novelty. The same thing should be applied when we talk about the wisdom of Torah and the sichlus and the foolishness of chokhmas chitzonis. Shall they birur hachokhma del umazeh, sorting out the wisdom of the other side? Nase yisrein bechokhma de kedusha. This becomes an advantage in the chokhmah kedusha. It's sorry biur, but we need to explain the lechayre. Would seem after we already know the general, that through sorting out the other side, which is choshech, Yisrael ha'or min hachoshech, nasa Yisrael b'gedusha oir, there becomes an advantage to the light. We know that. So what is the novelty about this? Yes, Yisrael l'chochma min hasichus, that there's an advantage to chokhmah when it comes from sichus. And there's such a novelty here, to the extent he says about this, I see this. Shlomo Melech HaChochma Kol Adam, King Shlomo, who was wiser of all person. Now, Yesh Loimar, and based on the above, we can say that there is one thing to say that the avodah turns darkness to light, because that's the avodah. But to say that Torah, which is not through work, which is given, becomes higher through the L'umazeh, that's the Chiddush. Apia now yesh loimar, based on what we can say, when we say Yisrin means that the darkness turns to light, there is an advantage in the light. That's talking about the light which comes and it's drawn down through avodah. Avodah samato, you're gonna get a higher light through that avodah. Yisrael min hacheshech. Over there, it applies to say that work of turning darkness to light, that would bring down and more elevated hamshocha than the hamshocha which extend through just working in Yoni Kedusha. No, when you work with L'umaz and you turn it around, you get a higher level. But v'achidush the shloimo, what was the chidush of Ra'isani? That there's a yisrain lachoch ben asichlus v'Ra'isanihu shal yidei birur v'hafichas al L'umaz l'kedusha. That when we sort out and you turn L'umaz to kedusha, nasa yisrain gam b'chochmas haTorah, you also become an advantage in the wisdom of the Torah. The Torah which comes from above and not through avodah, there is also an advantage to the hamshocha of Torah if it comes through the turning around of Lumas Agam. For although the drawing down and the descent of the Torah below is something which comes on its own, not through avodas hamato, mitzad lemailo, this comes from above. Uke aloshin, as the loshin is matan Torah, matonim, given us the Torah, a gift from above. Shaloi mitzad avodas adam, not based on the work of the person. Now, we do find in Torah itself also hard work, like Talmud Chosam, who puts in effort, but everything was already given. V'gam mashe Talmud vosik osi l'chadish. Even this, that a studious student is going to come up with a novelty through putting effort, his effort in the occupation of Torah. Kvarnitin l'Moshe b'Sinai has already been given to Moshe b'Sinai. So all this comes from above. So what is it that the person is working on? He's already done. So why do we need the Talmud Vosik to work on it? The work, his hard work, is to reveal that which has already been given in a way of a gift. It's been given milmaylo. So the chiddush is that even in what's given above, yet still, by sorting out the foolishness of the external wisdoms, and turning it around to the wisdom of kedusha, practically meaning is you learn sciences or chochmas chitzonius in order to understand a idea in Torah. When he learns that wisdom, through this, to add knowledge in matters of Torah, that way, that wisdom is sorted out and it's included in Torah. You swapped it around from being just Chochmas Chitzonius, but you used it into Torah, it becomes included in Torah. So that provides Nasa Yisrael B'Chochmas HaTorah. This brings an advantage in the wisdom of Torah. L'mayla yoser mikmoy shehi mitzad atzmai, higher than the Torah is on its own. V'yisera mizu, and more than this, this is through turning around the person's learning Torah and turning around the Chochmas and Tzonius to Torah. But generally, through Adei Hados Yisrael, Koydem Matan Torah, through Yisrael's admitting before the Torah was given, Nase Yisrael Gam Bechlolus Ha'inyan the Matan Torah, there became an advantage in generally in the idea of Matan Torah. Now, it seems like Avodas Hamata Yisrael changes the Torah. Dagam Shematan Torah Hoysu B'derech Hamshocha Milamaylo. Although the giving of the Torah comes in a way that it's given from above, as the Onyonim Shebetoira Shemischatshim Al Yidei HaTalmid Vosik Shebchol Doir, because the ideas in Torah that come up, the novel ideas through the student in every generation, Hagam She'inyonim Atzmon Nitnu Kvar B'Sinai. So although the ideas, the concept itself, have been given Sinai, Hamshachosa Mehelim Ligiluhi Al Yidei HaAvodah VaHaYegiah Shel HaTalmid Vosik. How does it come out from obscurity to revelation? That which has been given comes through the work and the effort of the Talmud Vosik. Mashen Kain Hamshocha the Matan Torah. But when we talk about by Matan Torah, that just came from above. There was no work, there's no effort. And yet, there is an advantage of Chochma min hasichel, mikol makom. Aidei habirur v'hafichas hachochma del umazeh l'chochma v'gedusha sha'idei dos Yisrael. That sorting out and the turning around of the wisdom of Lumazeh to Chochma Kedusha that came through Yisrael's admission, Ata Yadaiti, Nase Yisrael Kaviyachol Gam B'HaTorah Shenitna Matan Torah, also an advantage in the Torah that was given by Matan Torah. So while the advantage of Torah that comes through sorting out or through the effort of the Talmud Vosik, so that is still, even though it was given from above, but still it puts in his effort. But by Matan Torah, it was totally given from above. And yet, even in there, we say that there is a difference that takes place through the fact that Yisrael was made. So, V'yesh Loimar, the Yisrael, so we can say what is, so to speak, the advantage that came in Torah through Yisrael's admission is the HaTorah mitzad atzmo inyon hu hamshocha milmaylo. So what did Yisrael add to the Torah? Torah on its own is to bring down from above. Sha'avodas hamata ina magil l'shom. And the work that below does cannot reach that level. It comes only alone. Umikol shikein, and for sure, sha'avodah da'afichas ha'choshech d'l'umazeh l'gedusha, that work of turning darkness of l'umazeh to gedusha ina magil l'shom. That cannot reach there. Why? Because it doesn't have any connection to darkness. Because relative to the light of Torah, there is no cheshach. But through the fact that Matan Torah came through the turnaround and through the admission of Yisroi. Nimshach bo ha'atzmus shelamaylo megeder d'maylo mata. So it was extended in Torah the essence which is higher than Maylo mata of Oir v'choshech, light and darkness. So what came up through that Heidos of the Atzmus coming down into Torah, Shal Yidei ha'avoida ve'yagia yuchlu l'chadish b'Torah. That when you work hard and you put effort, you can come up with new novelty in Torah, which is la'foshalo, to make it bigger, increase. And through the sorting out of the foolishness of the external chokhmas, there should become an advantage of chokhmas HaTorah. That took place through the Haidah from Yisroi Ata Yadaiti Ki Godol Havai.